Right. Let me elaborate these four signs for the decline of the Roman Empire. Um, the first one, the abandoned farmland. This phenomenon occurred as farmers abandoned their land due to a harsh and oppressive taxation system. It is signified the collapse of the agricultural economy, which at the time supported the vast majority of the population. Um, and the second one is the sharp decline in stone inscriptions. Though the Roman middle and upper classes had a long tradition of donating buildings to their local communities and commemorating these acts with stone inscriptions. However, starting in the mid-third century, the production of these inscriptions plummeted to one-fifth of previous levels. This has been interpreted as a key indicator of a loss of confidence among the elite and the upward spread of moral and economic corruption. Um, in the late third century, hyper inflation and currency devaluation, the repeated debasement of the silver coin led to severe hyperinflation comparable to that of post-World War One Germany, causing the imperial economy to crumble. The fourth is the point that the spread of Christianity was identified as the fourth cause that accelerated the empire's decline. Given viewed clergy and monks as idle mouths, unproductive members of society who drained the empire's economic vitality. Furthermore, he argued that Christian teachings emphasizing love and forgiveness weakened the military virtues that had made Rome great. While frequent theological disputes among religious leaders hindered imperial unity. For these four points, arguably, we can point out the problems that like this. For the first point, it turns out these weren't actually abandoned. Agri deserti. It's not like abandoned farmlands. The term, uh, scholars point out that the term this agri deserti refer to unproductive lands, not abandoned farmland, but unproductive lands that were simply exempted from taxation. It was an administrative classification, not a sign of economic ruin. For the second point about the decline in stone inscriptions, um, the decrease in stone inscriptions didn't mean the economy was failing. Rather, it happened it happened because local council budgets, which previously funded these public monuments, were confiscated by the central government. On the third point, scholars uh, um, s- argue that inflation and wealth, while hyperinflation did occur, um, the the devaluation of silver coins didn't mean a total loss of wealth. This is because most Roman landowners held their riches, wealth in real assets, land, crops, and precious metals. Therefore, the fluctuating value of silver had little impact on the overall wealth of the elite. On the fourth point, the rise of Christianity, it's I think we could discuss the issue of Christianity more in detail later. Um, as of right now, it's worth noting that Odoacer in English, Odoacer, the leader who finally overthrew Rome, actually belonged to the Arian Christian sect. This complicates the idea that Christianity was purely an internal weakness that softened Rome for pagan invaders. Christian belief didn't affect the military power of some groups. Yeah, although it's a clear uh, but um, counterexample for the um, uh, the Edward Gibbon's assertion on the issue of on the rise of Christianity. Um, more stronger evidence from the according to these two authors, um, a new explanation has emerged that challenges Gibbon's internal decline theory. This new perspective is thanks to discoveries made by French archaeologists in the 1950s. They found ruins in the countryside of northern Syria dating back to the 4th to 6th centuries, the very end of the Roman era. As you can see, the images, the building materials, you see the buildings behind them. The building material used here was stone. Unlike wood or mud bricks, stone survives as ruins and often has the dates of construction carved into it. These ruins reveal something shocking. They were the homes of wealthy late Roman peasants. This directly contradicts Gibbon's description of a collapsing, impoverished agricultural society. um, in the uh, likewise, in a similar way, in the 1970s, archaeologists studying pottery fragments like this, pottery fragments across the former Roman Empire reached a startling conclusion. Late 4th century rural settlements were actually at their peak, not in decline. Contrary to Gibbon's description of a rural world suffering under crushing taxes, the countryside was thriving. Rome didn't slowly wither away after centuries of visual decay. Instead, right before its fall, Rome remained an overwhelmingly agricultural powerhouse with record-breaking production levels. The transition from this peak to total collapse happened with shocking speed. Evidence for this was found buried deep in the soil. The depth of the furrows suggesting that the farmers were using heavy plow. Can you see the plow right on the left, indicating highly advanced and productive farming techniques. Though the authors know that the 4th century plow technology remains a complex topic. Yeah, we can discuss this issue in the latter part of this course while reading Ferdinand Broder's book. Just wait until then. Yeah, okay. All right. Can you see the plow, right? And the strong and heavy plow. Using heavy plow meaning the higher productivity of the farming. So, yeah, the authors are talking about um, the uh, the like basically different point of view of the late Roman society. Um, just now we dive into the chapter two, empire and enrichment. The chapter opens with a poem by Decimus Ausonius, a Christian poet from the late fourth century. Let me read. Let me let me read. The roofs of country houses, uh, perched high on the overhanging river banks, the hillsides green with vines, and the pleasant stream of the Mosel gliding below with subdued murmuring. He describes the Mosel River Valley, a tributary of the Rhine in what is now modern-day Germany. I'm not sure about the exact pronunciation of this river, but Mosel would be the right one. Um, this poet, Ausonius, paints a vivid big picture of the countryside, the simple, rustic joys of pleasant life, and the magnificent, breathtaking beauty of the local Los Villas. What can we infer about rural Roman life from this? Can we see any of the decaying and falling romance that Gibbon described? Quite the opposite. Um, However, the authors go a step further. They argue that there is a radical hidden meaning in Ausonius' description. This is very interesting. The underlying message is that life in the Mosel Valley had become so prosperous and beautiful that it could actually be compared to the Tiber River, the heart of Roman, the heart of Rome itself. It suggests that life in the Gallic countryside, specifically in Bordeaux here, was just as enriched and vibrant as life in the imperial center of Rome. Although the authors don't focus heavily on this, we must remember that by the, by the fourth century, Rome readers had already moved the political center, the capital, to east, and right here, Constantinople, um, or Byzantium, right? Or however, as barbarian tribes began to invade, the Western Roman Empire started to dissolve in the 5th century, and the central power gradually shifted from Rome to Gaul area or the Europe today. From an economic perspective, the case of Ausonius we just discussed acts as a crucial hint. It suggests a major shift the economic center. It suggests a major shift of the economic center from the traditional heartland to the rising provinces. Um, the case of Bordeaux uh, or Gaul area. During the peak of the Roman Empire, the region of Bordeaux in Gaul, modern-day France, um, became a flourishing agricultural hub due to its fertile soil, perfectly suited for grapes and olives. Establishment of provinces after the Rome military conquered this area They became official provinces where many Roman citizens migrated and settled. Um, in ancient times, the cost of moving goods, in other words, logistics, was extremely high. Just think of the these high logistics cost and shift in consumption patterns, uh, often far exceeding the cost of moving goods, often far exceeding the actual cost of the agricultural products themselves. Um, Roman citizens in the provinces like Bordeaux prefer to consume cheaper local products rather than paying for expensive imports brought up all the way from Italy. So since they raise vines and produce vine the like oils and like the wines, they didn't have to spend money on the expensive goods from uh, the center of Roman Empire, that is Rome city area, the peninsula of Italy. It's natural, right? And it is like a natural phenomenon among the society of the empire. So the authors say that wealth moves to provinces or movable wealth. Just think of this diagram. Um, Originally, the imperial economic system was strictly core-centric everywhere. In the case of Roman Empire, the core was undoubtedly the Italian peninsula and the city of Rome itself. If we look at modern Western history, this core was Great Britain in the 19th century, and since the 20th century, it has clearly shifted to the United States. This center has existed throughout Western history, and the timeline of its movement is quite distinct. It started with Rome in ancient times, shifted to Italian city-states and European nations in the Middle Ages, and moved through Portugal, Spain, and Netherlands and Germany in the early modern era, before before landing in Great Britain and finally the United States. Today, many people, including the authors, believe this center is now shifting toward where? Of course, China. And media and many people say that Mr. Trump is afraid of uh, this shift toward China in many areas, right? Anyway, the as the empire expanded and provinces developed their own self-sufficient economic system, wealth began to shift away from the central toward the surrounding regions. We call it periphery. As provincial economies thrived, the products and economic influence of central Italy weakened, as they could no longer compete with local provincial markets. The authors argue that this fundamental change in the economic system, where the periphery grew stronger while the core shrank, was a major contributing factor to the fall of Rome. I repeat again, the authors argue that this fundamental change in the economic system, where the periphery grew stronger while the core shrank, this was a major contributing factor to the fall of Rome. This is the authors suggest a case study and comparing two. different families. One is Rome, and the other is from the modern era from the United States. A Roman case from rural west to imperial power. Um, the story of Ausonius, yeah, the Christian poet. I remember that, right? And as his um, the story of the Ausonius family perfectly illustrates how, at least during the empire's expansion period, seized opportunities to convert the capital. It is a classic example of incorporation into the imperial elite through agricultural wealth. Um, the father, Ausonius, the father was a prominent landowner in the Gallic countryside, Bordeaux. Yeah. Instead of simply buying more land, he strategically invested the wealth accumulated from agriculture into his son's education. Essential to thanks to this investment, his son uh, Decimus Magnus Ausonius moved to the new imperial capital, Constantinople. There, he became the tutor of the emperor's son and eventually rose to the highest possible office, that is, consul. Though this process demonstrates how a peripheral elite can penetrate the core power structure by using cultural capital, um, education. Um, and he used this Ausonius family used um, agricultural capital through into cultural capital into the education. As a result of that, yeah, he got he ranked the highest position in the Roman Empire. What we see here is a very modern looking success story. The father understood that while land brings wealth, education brings power. Yeah, agricultural capital into cultural capital, and they got the power. By sending his son to the heart of the empire with the best possible education, he was essentially laundering provincial money into imperial influence. This tells us two things. First, the Roman territory was wealthy enough to fund such ambitions, and second, the Roman social system was still fluid enough to allow a talented outsider from Bordeaux to become a consul in the capital. This is quite impressive, right? The periphery wasn't just supporting the core; it was producing the leaders of the empire. Um, yeah, quite fancy, right? This is a Vanderbilt family house, and, but they changed into like a museum. Anyway, this family, the Vanderbilt family in America, has so many mansions like this. Yeah, one of the most richest guys in the history of the United States, and though separated by centuries and geography, the Vanderbilt family shares a striking structural similarity with the Ausonius family in how they navigated the imperial landscape. Jan Artsen, Jan Artsen, who immigrated from Netherlands to America in 1640. As descendants of Dutch immigrants, Jan and his family started with humble roots in agriculture and manual labor. However, they were quick to recognize the shifting social structure. Their first major step was linguistic and cultural adaptation, moving away from their Dutch roots to master the English-speaking mainstream of the rising American empire. They possessed an uncanny ability to spot technological shift during the 19th century Industrial Revolution. Cornelius Vanderbilt, his great grandson, the Cornelius, uh, transitioned from transporting agricultural goods on small boats to building a massive steamship and railroad empire. By controlling the veins and arteries of the nation, that is transportation, they moved from the periphery of the labor class to the very center of American economic power, accumulating wealth that defined the so-called Gilded Age. By con and so the this Vanderbilt family possess the American system of the transportation, including trains and ships. Um, uh, yeah, kind of history. This family is very history, and after this family, now all of us we are all know these two guys, right? Is one of the yeah the the king of the like the Andrew Carnegie founded the U.S. Steel and and the Rockefeller is the yeah. I'm sure you all know these names, right? These two guys are just following the case of the Cornelius Vanderbilt. All right. The common thread, what these two cases share is the presence of um, ambitious and brilliant individuals who made pivotal choices. They changed their family history forever. Their success came from their uncanny ability to spot and seize the opportunities within and the evolution of an empire. Ausonius um, leveraged the existing elite systems of the Roman Empire. He recognized that in a mature empire, the cultural capital, specifically the classical education and patronage system, was the ultimate key to the imperial court. Um, the Vanderbilt family capitalized on the industrial system during a massive geopolitical shift. They caught the waves as the world's economic center of gravity was moving from Europe to America. They didn't just adapt to the change; they became the infrastructure of that change. Um, yeah, it's time to make a conclusion. As we conclude this section, we find a striking and powerful similarity between the two empires. Um, Ironically, the crisis hits exactly when the empire appears to be at its most magnificent, just when both Rome and America seem to have reached their absolute peak. The underlying forces of change began to surface. In the long run, both empires experienced a fundamental shift in their centers of political and economic dominance. The core could not remain the center forever. And all right. Um, so this is the most critical point. Both empires became incredibly wealthy by integrating and developing the periphery, the surrounding world. However, this very wealth became the root of their own decline. By enriching the surrounding world, the empire created powerful competitors that would eventually challenge its own dominance. This point will be repeated, and the authors provides more solid reasons for this argumentation. Okay, all right. That's all for today. Thank you for your listening and watching the lecture. Have a great weekend and see you next week. Bye bye.